Harry. Hi. Yes. So Melanie and I, we are going to be speaking about ethical design and innovation, beast of a topic. So more about me. My name is Agnes and I work at Schibsted. So Schibsted is the biggest media group in the Nordics. We run the major news destinations of Sweden and Norway, but also a lot of other digital consumer brands across the region. We're also a major startup investor, and we invest in a lot of early stage Nordic venture companies. My fluffy title, Data and AI Specialist, is supposed to tell you that I work with lots of different strategic projects related to how and why we use data and AI across our portfolio. I have a background in product, building machine learning solutions for our different brands. I'm also doing a PhD. I'm doing research at KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. And there I look specifically at how AI is transforming journalism, trying to identify sustainable strategies for that space. Melanie, you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm the founder and CEO of Panion, though I like the way Harry pronounced it, Panion. We're a community management platform that helps community managers build more meaningful and engaged communities. I myself have a background in anthropology and also in documentary filmmaking. And I have been living in Sweden for the last 6 years, originally from New York City. And for us at Panion, we started off actually wanting to create a tool that helps you meet new people when you're feeling socially disconnected, something very appropriate right now, actually. And we were purposely focused on building a useful your social life to help create more in-person connection away from your screen. And then COVID hit, and we came to realize that virtual connections can actually also positively contribute to your mental health if formed with the purpose of supporting, sharing, and connecting in a meaningful way. So through our research, we found that this often occurred within the context of a shared purpose or a common experience. So we pivoted our product to create a community engagement platform that encourages meaningful connection within large globalized networks. And I myself realized that too much screen time was giving me anxiety, preventing me from sleeping, and began comparing how I felt, for example, after a night on my phone versus a night out to dinner with my friends. And I'm sure many people here can relate to that. So as I noticed this about myself and suddenly was in the position of building my own tech product, I became more and more interested in how our design process can consciously consider our users' mental health, especially because our whole mission is trying to improve mental health by creating a sense of belonging and inclusion and to eradicate loneliness. So it got me thinking, as a new company owner, what is the responsibility of a company to make sure products we build have purpose and do not explicitly do harm to our society? So as we all know, our world continues to digitize at an insanely rapid rate, but at the same time, the digital world is also draining us in many ways, and we can't seem to step away from it. So at times we confuse a sense of utility with a feeling of empowerment. But we have digital products and services that can do so many things at once. Do they actually give us more control? Yep. And why are we so willing to give an exorbitant amount of time and energy to our products if they often make us feel bad? And is it because they are useful, or is there another reason behind it? So on average, we pick up our phones 58 times per day for a total of 3 hours and 15 minutes. And the single pickup can set off a chain reaction because that products within our phones are often very addictive. And purposely so. We design products that way, and we even measure their success by what we call their stickiness.
Definitely. And I know that you're facing lots of these questions and reflections as a startup founder and running your startup, but these ideas that you're tapping into, they're in no way limited to this startup sphere or to the product space, but for any company, as the company grows, so will their impact on users and society. And I think these questions, they just become bigger as companies evolve. So I for one, work for a fairly big organization. We're about 6,000 people. But even more important than our size, our services are being used by millions of people every day. And our services often have a quite direct impact on our users' lives. That could be what information you get from our newspapers, from reading Aftonbladet or Svenska Dagbladet in Swedish. But it could also be what goods you buy or sell on Blocket in Sweden or Den blåa avisen in Denmark. We have a responsibility to make sure that we implement new technologies in these various products in ways that align with our mission. For Schibsted, that mission is to empower people in their everyday lives. But we all have missions as companies, and how do we make sure that we use technology to build towards that, not against it? So we're really shifting into the topic of our panel now, or of our conversation, Melanie. What do you think? Is there such a thing as a recipe for responsible tech practices that align with our missions as companies?
I'm not sure if there's actually a recipe, but I believe that as product creators and designers, we have to keep mental health at the forefront of our minds and design products that empower us and enhance our natural capabilities without disrupting our natural rhythms. So we need to stop hacking people's experiences for the benefit of the producers of our products. I think empowerment means your technology gives you agency, allows you to improve your life without having an ulterior motive, like, as we've seen, selling your data to a third party or exploiting your weaknesses in some way. Our products are there when we need them, but not disruptive when we don't need them. So as a startup, this is hard because we are reliant on investors who expect us to build a product that shows the type of traction that they want to see. And we have come to define the success of our digital products by metrics that I think in general further, not us, but our society has come to define the success of products by metrics that further promote this addiction and mentally unhealthy behaviors. And I think that's a big problem. I think this allows the investors to decide which products to invest in based on these like sticky, addictive metrics. And it demonstrates that these behaviors because they believe they're more potential for exponential growth, for example. But right. What happens when this doesn't align with the core values of your company? Are you forced to suddenly create products just so that you can get investment and to compromise your values just because you need investment money to go forward? And this is a position that we kind of feel like we've been in a few times.
Right, having to adapt your product to the expectations or
exactly
kind of the limitations also of investors. They probably don't know what questions to ask, right? They focus on stickiness because that's a metric that they know, that they've tested before.
Yeah, and I think like it's very different early on when we were still building, where technology wasn't as developed. We wanted people to be using things, but then we kind of hit this threshold where now people are maybe using things too much and it's compromising us as human beings, and we need to maybe take a few steps back. So as a social impact company, we want to help people find a balance between online and offline interactions and to help people create more meaningful connections. And that might not be measured by quantity as much as by quality. So some of the questions that we rarely get, but I hope investors would ask me more, would be things like, how do your customers feel after using your product? Or how genuine are the interactions between your users? And how are you measuring this? Or even people wondering why we're monetizing without direct advertising, why we're looking for creative ways to monetize and grow as our actual customers grow with us, rather than just doing the traditional way of, oh, it'd be so easy. People say, oh, it'd be so easy to just add a bunch of ads into your platform and you could make a lot of money. And like, but that's not what we believe in. And that's not the kind of product we want to be. And some people just, they look for the easy route and they don't understand why you wouldn't want to go there.
Right,
you
right.
know?
So you're kind of educating your investors. I think those are great questions. And they should not just apply to investors, though. They could apply to our own teams as well. We could ask these questions to ourselves on a rolling basis. If I could, I would add another question to what's already a great list, but I'd suggest asking our teams, how do we see our products contributing to the bigger picture of our users' lives? What's the impact when they put away their phone or put away their laptop and stop using our services? How can we have a positive impact in the mosaic of their life.
Mm.
And I think, like, on the topic of reflection in teams, I think this is largely a question about who we have at the table when we talk about our product. And Melanie, I know that you've been building a great team around your product, around Panion. So I was wondering if you wanted to share any thoughts or comments on if you had a strategy in terms of recruiting people who actually care about these issues. I know that you're passionate about mindful technologies and technologies that respect human values, but have you been recruiting people with that purpose, or are you bringing people in and try to kind of bring them on board that mission as they're already recruited?
I think it's been a learning process for us. I think at the beginning, you want to find people that are like-minded and that share your vision, but you also need people with certain types of skills and skills that complement and that fill the gaps. And sometimes you'll find those skills, but maybe that person wasn't so passionate about your mission from the beginning, but they can become passionate about it. They just need to learn more, to know more. So I think it's really finding a balance between the two and taking it on a case-by-case basis. We've chosen to have a remote team since COVID so that we could really access people from all over the world with diverse skill sets. And I think it's important to have a diverse team because you're definitely more equipped to deal with the pace at which the world is changing. And
not least in COVID times, right? I mean, the world is changing more rapidly
really
than ever. Are there any where you see like a direct link between the diversity of your team and how you've managed the COVID shift? I know that you pivoted your app.
I think because we were already like half when we went fully remote, I think there were less growing pains in going fully remote than a lot of other startups might have had. We already kind of had that culture built in. It was just a bit of a divide between the people in the office and the people outside. And I think this actually made more cohesion because we were all on the same footing and we all had the same experience of working from home now. And we actually became closer because of it. I think it's really important, especially for what we're building. This is a social product because we need to have people on our team that really represent our customers, and our customers are very diverse. And we're about accepting your differences, bringing people together who might not have met before through some sort of common interest, for example. And so we needed that in our team because we need that perspective. We need all those different perspectives. So, but I do think that we're confronted with questions like, how do you build a culture that fits and unite over celebrating people that think differently? And I think it's hard to kind of find people that from the beginning all have the same mission as you. I think it's just more of a mindset so like that people
coming together in diversity, unification and diversity.
Yeah, and I think diversity also helps you uncover potential biases in your product that you wouldn't have noticed if you were all the same, had the same mindset or the same perspective on things. And I think that balance is very, very hard. You know, I think everybody's trying to figure out that balance all the time. But I'm curious how you approach diversity at Schibsted and related to your tech development team.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely in a different situation because you're building a team of how many people are you?
8.
And we're a tech organization of thousands building products. So there's definitely challenges in scaling that idea of celebrating diversity. But there's also much more potential in actually being diverse because you have more seats at the table.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned that diversity in your teams, it's a way to kind of uncover biases, but I think in general, it's a way to deal with potential ethical implications or ethical considerations in your product space. And like starting there, I think it's really important for big and small organizations to recognize that those are going to be surfacing. The question when you're in an industry working with new technologies, for me that's AI, but we're all working with different technologies. It's important to recognize that the question isn't really if we're going to have big questions to discuss, but rather how we choose to approach them. And at Schibsted, we've chosen a quite interdisciplinary approach. So we are aiming for diversity of thoughts and diversity of disciplines. So we're trying to uncover both the potential and the possible implications of our AI developments. So I'm actually currently working with a Cambridge philosopher. We're mapping out the academic discourse on AI ethics and ethical risks in AI, pairing that with practical product experiences and product potential in Schibsted. So we're trying to kind of see if the theoreticians and practitioners are speaking about the same things. Are we worried about the same things? And in the end, like what we want to do is to uncover where we don't want to go. How do we set up an organization to avoid these pitfalls that the theoreticians and practitioners are identifying, using the academic space as kind of a vehicle to build better products. Another thing that we've done on the topic of tech and diversity is that we've run training sessions on algorithmic bias or algorithmic bias prevention. So algorithmic bias is this idea of human biases being built into algorithmic or technological products. And these biases, algorithmic biases, they're just as likely to go away as human biases are. So again, the question isn't if they're there, but how to approach them. So what we've done is that we've run a training program with our product and tech teams, discussing where biases might slip in their development cycles, discussing the potential risks of biases for their specific product, making the theme kind of come closer to them so that it's not just this kind of vague, ambiguous topic that they know is important but don't really know how it relates to our actual product. This is not like a safety mechanism per se, but it is an awareness mechanism that we think are going to be rendering us better equipped to actually deal with these issues if they occur. If we talk about them, if we reflect about it, we think that we'll be better equipped at managing it. But I mean, again, we're a big organization, so not every team, definitely not every startup is going to be able to run training programs like I did with hundreds of employees or hire in-house philosophers. I'm not sure if that's in your budget, Melanie.
No, definitely not.
I would recommend it. But
one day.
But if we can't do that, I think there's still lots of ways that we can build these reflections into our teams. So 3 basic pieces of advice would be like, first, try to recruit for diversity, but think about diversity not as in visuals, but as in perspectives and thoughts.
Yeah, definitely.
And startups have limited seats at the table, at least in the beginning. So try to think about how you can bring as much diversity of thought into the mix, even if you're just 2 or 3 or 5 people. Try to make sure that you didn't all go to the same school or hang out in the same tiny circle. A second piece of advice is try to map out your potential ethical risks. Have discussions around what your product actually is going or could be risking. There are downsides to most things in life, so bring them up and don't act as if they're not existent. Once you figure out what they might be, we're better equipped at acting upon them. And then the final advice is really related, and that's don't just do this once. Build this into your culture. Mapping, in my space, doing AI ethics reviews like once for a PR stunt, that's a big thing. But will that really change the culture, and will that really safeguard our product developments going forward? I'm not so sure. So I think we need to really build it in as an iterative thing that we do as teams. And Melanie, I know that you're closer to the actual product development than I am. I'm working on a strategic level. So do you see any potential in like building in these questions in a straightforward product way?
Yeah, definitely. I think we're doing a lot of the same things in terms of company for our product development. It's helped us a lot to define our guiding star. What type of company do we want to be, and what kind of company do we not want to be? Because I think that still informs your product so much, right? And we take an ethical stance. And I think as a founder, a lot of that is actually up to me in a small company, but it's definitely something we talk a lot about. And we also began learning how to best understand and measure our own impact and its potential and the risks around our product and people using our product. So I think a lot of it is about just being very mindful and thinking about these things. I think the first step is actually just having these conversations and thinking about them. And so many companies don't even do that. And that, I mean, if you are doing that, you should already be feeling like you're one step ahead of many people. And as product designers, I actually kind of came up with some questions and some ways to kind of ask our own team questions. And I think anyone can use these questions to really look to rethink how we're designing digital products in a new, more conscious way. So I can just read a few of the questions that I came up with. For one, how are users' roles viewed in the life cycle of the product? So does the value of the product require users' resources like their attention or their data? And are they also benefiting from the product with a perceived value? So like, are you exploiting people?
Right.
And if you're getting something from people, like, are they getting something back, or is it a one-way street? Because
and that's such a big topic. We're discussing like, is data is a currency. How do we provide value in return for that currency that we get from our users? Definitely a really relevant question.
Yeah. And then who owns this data and how can they control it? And I think GDPR helped quite a bit with this one, bringing it to light and having some regulations around it, but it's still, a huge issue. And I think now people are more aware that they can ask these questions to companies. We get this question, we get emails about this. People ask us all the time, where do you store our data? If I don't want you to have my data anymore, what do you do with it? And I think being very transparent about that and building trust with the people that are using your products is really important. The next one I have is, how are you driving engagement? And are you manipulating human psychology to hook people on your product? Because I think that you should build a product because people feel empowered by your product and they find it useful. But if you're building these tricks that really, again, going back to the stickiness and the addictive behavior, where people aren't really in control or aware of how and why they're using your product, are they really gaining value, or are you just sucking their time and their data and their privacy and all these things?
So back to the idea of actual value in return, and not just
exactly
financial value, but actual human value in return.
Yeah, I think we talked about this, but what are your ethical standards? And this is obviously quite subjective, but having that conversation and defining those as a company is important. And then who's profiting, again, from anything created on your platform? So businesses and customers should both gain value, like we said, but if things are being created, like, who owns that content? And are you just as a company benefiting from that?
Right.
I noticed that we have a question here.
We do. We have a question. So in which ways would you advise startups to take risks on being diverse in bringing in new cultures?
I guess my question would be, why is it risky to do that? Or why do you consider that a risk? In an ideal world, I think that we should be for our team, like, I didn't really think about diversity because I thought about the perspective that they brought and not about the person themselves as being diverse. I saw, like, what do they bring to the table? And by looking at it that way, we happened to end up with a very diverse team because we needed those different perspectives. But I guess it's also diversity in a sense.
Right. And just to build up on what you say here, it's could we flip the logic and, instead of seeing diversity as a risk, start highlighting all the potential, both to do good, but also in financial terms? There's so much research being done on diverse teams outperforming homogenous teams.
Yeah.
So being a diverse team is really a USP that you can show your investors, show the business case, show the research, and say that we're not taking a risk here. We're doing the opposite of taking a risk. It's all of these really homogenous, all male or all female teams, or all business student teams that are taking the risk.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm going to skip a few of my questions, but the last one was more about how can our design encourage balance and well-being, and how do we make sure that our products are part of our user lives, but not the center of them. As much as we build companies and want to be the center of people's lives sometimes, because we feel like we've put so much effort and work into creating this amazing product, I think we need to think how we can complement people's lives and be a part of their lives in a healthy way.
Right. These are such important questions, Melanie. I hope that other startups, but also other big companies like mine, implement these in practice. And there's so many ways to hold ourselves accountable, hold our products accountable. So thank you for those questions, and thank you for the conversation. It's fun to compare the big and the small. Hopefully you'll be as big as us one day.
Yeah, actually having insight from a company your size is super valuable for us as a startup, because there's so much we can't anticipate as we scale. So thank you as well for sharing your experience. I think it's important for these kinds of conversations to continue to happen, for us all to learn from each other in this way.
Agreed. Thank you for everyone who tuned in. We don't know who we are, but we thank you for listening.
Yeah.